February 17th, 1944 would be the final day for thousands of Japanese soldiers occupying Chuuk Lagoon. The Americans would call the death that they rained down on them Operation Hailstone, one of the many island assaults required before they could bomb the mainland and end the war. And beyond a few dozen bombers lost to the flak, it was a complete success. Nearly 50 Japanese ships and hundreds of warplanes sank below these waves, never to return. And yet, despite their glorious imperial death, nearly 80 years later, they're threatening these shores once again. Hundreds of feet down, and yet somehow they're still more dangerous than if they were on the surface. Because an army is more than just its soldiers, and what sank here was more than just guns. Beneath these waves, hundreds of feet down, lies the last gasps of the empire of the rising sun. A monster from the depths that's bubbling back up with vengeance. No, I'm not talking about Godzilla. I already made that video. I'm talking about oil. Today's story is about oil. Hundreds of tons of oil. Oil that would have fed a war machine so far forgotten we're already starting to repeat its mistakes. But while it might be history to most, that doesn't mean it's actually gone anywhere. Of the 47 ships that went down in Chuuk Lagoon during Operation Hailstone, 3 were oil tankers. But they obviously weren't the only ones full of oil. A battleship has a huge belly, and many of the sport vessels would have been covered in drums all across their decks. And today that's causing a bit of a problem. They call it a time bomb, but it's one that's been exploding ever since that fateful day all those years ago. It's just that we're starting to reach the point where the rust and decay are so pronounced that those cracks are about to burst wide open and flood this lagoon with liquid death. Which, as you might imagine, is of great concern to the thousands of people who rely on this water for their daily bread. Chuuk is still predominantly a subsistence society, and what they mainly subsist on is fish. Fish who live in this lagoon. Fish who now take refuge on those ships. Fish who taste a whole lot better when they aren't covered in oil. And alongside that, which is surprisingly more important to the story than the survival of the local people, Chuuk Lagoon is a scuba diving mecca. It's one of the most prestigious and sought-after places to dive real, historical, meaningful wrecks. Not some ship a tourism agency sunk to make up for their reef dying, but a near paradise for those who find value in exploring underwater. In turn, it's by far the most important resource for this island's economy. Chuuk needs these wrecks because it needs these divers. And although I'm sure they won't be happy to see their food bloated on some slicked wave, they simply don't have the resources to solve what they see coming. But the thing about scuba divers is that they tend to be very serious people, meticulous people, especially those who are so dedicated to it that they'd pay tens of thousands of dollars to fly to one of the most obscure islands in the world just to do it. They're not the sort of pilgrims who just let their temples collapse. And the more that come here, the more that are willing to help. Plus, they're not alone in that. Because interestingly enough, the other major group that are here aiming to clean up these wrecks aren't just pleasure divers. They aren't fishery officials or local Chuukese protecting their reef. They're Japanese. What's more, they're an organization started and managed by World War II veterans. People who specifically came here looking to mitigate the damage of their past. Penance for a genuinely horrible crime. It was originally started as an organization dedicated to removing landmines, but they've since extended their reach into Micronesia and more specifically this lagoon. Because what's a better way to say they're sorry? And so today, both Japanese military and civilian divers are heading down with bags and pumps to remove this oil by hand, one bag at a time. It's grueling, painstaking, dangerous work. The ships they're cleaning tend to be about 150 to 250 feet deep, deep enough that you need a great deal of specialization just to get down there at all, let alone while carrying complicated equipment. And yet today, they're routinely heading down, dive by dive, bag by bag, to clean up their mistake. Yet for all their dedication, the answer to this problem might have actually arrived here on its own. As crazy as it sounds, the oil leaking out of these tankers in the long run might actually turn out to be a good thing. Lucky even. Because without this oil, researchers would have never come here. Without this looming threat, they wouldn't have had a reason to find a solution. And yet because it did, because the American butterfly flapped its wings back in 1944, in 2015, Australian and New Zealand divers found something in one of the wrecks that might actually change the course of the entire world. On the Shinkoku Maru, one of the oil tankers sitting deep below the surface, their research found that the hydrocarbon sample they took didn't nearly have the oil reserves that they expected it to. Oil reserves that, despite all that fog of war, they're quite certain should have been there. It's almost like the oil was being consumed as soon as it left the tank. And what's more, it was being consumed at a rate that was almost unbelievable. So they began collecting samples from all around the wreck, trying to find out what might be causing this. And in doing so, they seem to have found a naturally occurring bacteria that consumes oil. Or I suppose more technically, breaks down the hydrocarbon chain into water and CO2. But it's a living creature that can quite literally clean up an oil spill, that can make up for our mistakes without causing new ones. No pump, no bag. But that said, the bacteria alone isn't perfect. Nothing ever is, I suppose. Left by itself, it simply won't be fast enough to solve this problem. Not to say that they're slow specifically. I mean, how fast can you eat oil? But it's just we simply don't have that much time. Plus, they can't really be put inside the actual tanks where the problem is the worst, because their byproduct of CO2 would likely burst them open even faster. And although I don't want to keep ripping into these poor bacteria, there's another small problem that the researchers are finding, because it seems that they're less efficient when removed from their original home and placed on another patch. They seem to work best on the exact drums where they developed. Move them to a different one, and for whatever reason, they're far less effective. Kind of like me with bagel bites, I suppose. As disgusting as their childhood food might be to their little bacteria wives, that's what they learn to love. But perfect or not, it's a huge start, and it's only just begun being studied. This could be a potentially massive discovery, not just for this lagoon, but the entire world. Bacteria that can clean up oil spills. It sounds like science fiction. And while it might not be as noble as a man with a bag, frankly, I don't think the Japanese mind the help. Chuuk isn't even close to the only place with this problem. Wrecks from our wars litter our oceans, and because of the way we tend to harbor our vessels, they generally litter places of great value. Shorelines that humans and animals alike don't just love to look at, they rely on. It's easy to imagine history as something far away, especially when it quite literally is. But nothing could be further from the truth. Our world remembers everything, even when we forget it. History isn't in the past, it's in the waves. And truly, the only way we can ever fix our planet of the destruction we've caused is when we remember to clean up our mistakes, when we grab those bags and do the work, whether we find a helpful bacteria or not. So to end today's episode, I want to change direction a little bit and just say thank you. Not just to those divers and researchers who found that bacteria, but to Japan, to those veterans, for not forgetting what they did here, for coming back to clean up their trash, even when they had to do so bag by bag. Filming this series, we have been through so many war zones, places still littered with bombs over 50 years old, trash of both winner and loser. And what's worse, we've had to meet their victims. So I want to say thank you to Japan, to those veterans, for doing something that is far more rare than it should be, for apologizing with more than just words, for understanding, truly, that the sun can still rise, even after it sets. This is Rare Earth.